Calvary Bible Church, welcome back. Beyond Sunday is back. Sorry for all you folks who didn't know what to do with your lives for 2 weeks.
There are 5 of them. One's my mom, one's your mom. That's 3 left. Guess who they might be at church?
Yeah. Your wife, my wife.
Now we're down to 1. We did that fast.
Yeah.
We're pathetic.
Yeah, I was gone a week. You were gone a week. And if we were slicker, we would have had things planned out ahead of time, but we're not. So we just took 2 weeks off. And here we are.
When I'm gone, it doesn't matter. When you're gone, it matters.
Yeah, it can happen when you're gone. I just didn't make it happen last week. I was trying to hold the fort down.
You had to.
Phone's ringing off the hook.
Yeah.
Jill was losing her mind.
I get it.
Not really.
Some are ours.
You ready for a joke?
Never.
It has to do with the Fifth Sunday Fellowship.
Okay.
Where...
Did my mother give you this?
No, she did not.
Okay.
Where is the best place to learn how to make a banana split? See?
The
ice cream.
Best place to make one.
We did Fifth Sunday Fellowship, ice cream social, banana split. Yeah. Where do you learn how to make a banana split? Everybody knows this.
Let's see. Where do you learn to make a banana split? You do the splits in gymnastics.
How many degrees do you have? And you don't know this. Gee,
I don't know.
Sunday school.
Aww.
Sunday school.
A banana split. You
Obviously.
Make it in Sunday. Spell it for me. Yeah.
Sundae.
Yo, you did it. Good job.
Oh, I can spell it.
Yeah, but I didn't know you could spell that kind of Sunday.
I can spell both.
Well done.
Thank you.
Not
all right.
a joke, but the spelling.
Oh, thank you. So here we go. I've got 3 questions. One that has to do with the structure of the Psalms and the books. And then I want to have a question about Psalm 106, so taking us back 2 Sundays. And then one that came in about Psalm 107. Okay. So Psalter structure, we've got the 5 books. And I mentioned briefly the connection between Psalm 107, which is the first book of Book 5, or first Psalm of Book 5, and Psalm 106, the last of Book 4. So my question is, do the structure of the Psalms map at all in your studies? Have you seen, like, I'm just kind of curious here, do they map at all onto like Israel's story? Because Psalm 107 had to do with like post-exilic and not being deeper into the Psalms. I don't know if you are, or if you're more familiar with it than I am, but I was just curious because you've got, the Pentateuch, the 5 books of the law, you've got the 5 books of Psalms, but I was thinking about stages of Israel's history, and this being kind of a post-exilic, it's the last phase kind of Israel's history before Christ comes. And I just didn't know if you had seen or heard anything. Maybe it's a quick I don't know question, but made me wonder.
No, it's more of the story. Book 5 is now heading into all of these praise psalms, and it's going to end with a whole section of those. There's the songs of ascent is another category of multiple psalms. So this is the end of Israel's story. So most of the reading that I've done in the past says that these psalms are functioning for the people in exile. So there's no sense in which Book 5 is post-exilic in that sense, to use that language. I don't know of anybody saying that. So it's not tracking with all of their story, but it is, as I've said, telling a story, as opposed to reading the Psalms individually. See the books providing a sequence of Israel's journey, but not mirroring so much the Old Testament the way you're describing it. The ancient interpreters saw the 5 books of the Psalter matching the 5 books of Torah, the Pentateuch, the Genesis on to Deuteronomy. They've seen that for a long time, but more, I don't know, I forget when Gerald Wilson writes his dissertation in his book, but he kind of becomes one of the leading proponents of this. Now we know that the Psalms are categorized, they're collected with a purpose. And now we're into, you and I, the last 2 weeks, 106 into 107, now shifting to that final story where God's saying, I have not forgotten my covenant. I'm still going to be faithful to the promises I gave to David. And so now you move into all of the praise that's being offered because Israel is now looking forward to their final sort of their the salvation that they've hoped for. So a little bit of no for the first part of your question, but then still telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost their king, but they haven't lost their real king. David's not on the throne, and they don't really have a descendant. And someone asked me a great question about this several months ago about, there is a time when David's family is not in power. That is true, but the exile is part of the prophecy, and so coming out of the exile, headed into, let's say, just for our sakes, headed into Matthew chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got the son of David appearing again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful. And I know we're taking a break from the Psalms here for a little bit, but it's just always, they've been in our minds for a long time, and I think it's been fun and really interesting and helpful to understand the book as a whole. Mm-hmm. So going from one book to the next, jumping back into Psalm 106, there's a lot of sin talk there, right? The iniquity.
Yep.
Specifically verse 6 there, both we and our fathers have sinned. Mm-hmm. So one question there to get us started: how much do we need to consider the sins of our fathers, or like generational sins that maybe we see in our family, or we see it in our community, maybe even in our church? And what would your counsel be to kind of counteract that, or how should we think about that and move in a different direction?
I think that you're moving in a good direction spiritually when your growth includes a realization that I have a tendency to sin like this. Mm-hmm. Pelton sin like this. Kaufman sin like that.
Self-awareness.
And so I think that's a good indicator of my growth. Can I identify not only the fact that I think I'm maturing, but I am maturing by recognizing that there are family traits that I bring to the equation, and I am constantly fighting against those things. So I do think that's helpful. I've said this in church a lot through the years, that men in particular have a hard time poking fun at their dads. Not poking fun, pointing out the flaws of their fathers. That's not something that comes easy to men. When I poll men, for instance, I can't really speak of the ladies, but both of our wives involved with a lot of ladies at church and so forth. But for the guys, I don't even know one man, and maybe you do, I don't know of one man who said, my dad spent a lot of time discipling me. My generation, my father's generation, his father's generation, I don't know any of that.
Yeah.
Where the dad was instrumental setting not just a great example, because a lot of us would say our dads were good examples in certain things, but none of them had a sense in which their dads set them down and said, let's avoid certain destructive habits. Let's build certain righteous habits. That just seems to be something that's so foreign to a particular age and stage. And hopefully the younger ones are doing that. Hopefully we broke away from that mold. So I do think that's, even though verse 6 isn't touching on that specifically, it is a confession of sin that says, I am involved in the sins of our past, just like, not only have we sinned, but our fathers have sinned, and we're all in this together, and we desperately need the Lord, to help us. So that's kind of
and that's really insightful. The self-awareness and perception to see flaws in your family, your lineage. My family's a fill in the blank, proud family, materialistic family, whatever. Some may be more obvious than others, but to be aware of that, and then to break just break the trend.
Think about pride for a second. So, I heard you say pride word, and I thought every family has it. Mm-hmm. Pride is one of those sins where you can actually start to become much more sophisticated in the way in which you say, yeah, my family was proud like this. Mm-hmm. Somebody else's family was proud like this. There's different ways that pride manifests itself. So there's one of those self-awareness where you really can't even stop and say, yeah, it's just pride. Probably that's not going to win the day. You probably need to identify the type of pride. Mm-hmm. Then when you get down to that, you can start dealing with that with the Lord, saying, oh, Lord, I have no reason to be proud. You had to die for my sins. So I'm not squeaky clean in this at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And goodness, one of the biggest flaws in Psalm 106 of the fathers was they forgot. And they were forgetting throughout that whole psalm. They forgot. Israel did.
Derek Kidner said that was arrogance.
Okay.
He actually labeled it that way. Which I added to that a little bit. I thought, I can see what he's saying. But I think for me, it was more not just arrogance, but the forgetting is a sense of, this isn't really important to me. We remember what's important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that takes us to Psalm 107. Yeah. Because we find people in distress in these 4 different situations. Mm-hmm. And they're at a place where their pride was there was no more pride. The arrogance had gone for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. They were aware of how small they were. The reality of their sin came, their eyes were open to it. Whatever the case was, they cried out to the Lord, and He delivered them from distress. So the question came in. I have thoughts, but I'll let you jump in here first. Does God always deliver people from the distress that they're in? Because here's 4 scenarios, and in each one of them, I'll read one of the verses. They cried to the Lord in their trouble, and He delivered them from their distress. Mm-hmm. So that's repeated 4 times. Yeah. So how are we to take that? Literally?
I liked what you did on Sunday. That was so good when you said, I'm going to do something really special. And I thought I knew what you were going to do, and I guessed it. Yeah. But I thought that's really a great way to deal with that. And you did it twice because there were 2 different places, right? And not just the
2 verses. Let them thank the Lord for His steadfast love.
That was the other one. There was a Thanksgiving part of it too, which I thought was great. So the answer is no, He doesn't always, which you know that. Not yesterday. It seems like yesterday. It was last week. I was grading a paper, and one of the students was trying to give theological expression to an Old Testament text, and the wording they used made it sound like God always does this. Mm-hmm. And then I had to write back and say, "Be careful. Theological expression has to be able to fit the people of God for all times in all scenarios." So you know that someone is fudging with theological expression if they have to use the word may or might. Mm-hmm. If that's the way they word theological expression, they haven't found the theology of the text.
So give me an example there, the may or might.
Like here, if you worded verse 13, if someone said, so the theology in verse 13 is that God at times may deliver them from their distress. Uh-huh. And that's all they say. Yeah. The fact that they have to put a may in front of it is like He might or He might not. So you got to dig a little bit deeper and ask the question, well, why wouldn't He do that? Because it sounds so clear in 13. Yeah. This is what they did. This is what He did. They cried. He delivered.
Yeah. And this is looking back too,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And your
not
question
future.
Is, does He always do that? And the answer is no. If you go to Hebrews 11, which is on my mind because we start this new series on Sunday, you go to Hebrews 11 and you see there were a lot of people in distress that didn't get delivered.
Yeah, after the great heroes of the faith who were delivered,
yes,
you see ones that were not sawn in two.
That kind of stuff. So, yeah, as you know, the answer is no, which means that you're always reading the Bible as a whole, not piecemeal.
Right.
And so if you only got your theology from verse 13 alone, that's going to give you one reading. And that's what happens with a health and wealth type of gospel, what was often called a prosperity gospel, is if God always wants you to be healthy and wealthy, how does that explain so many things in the Bible? And so if you're only going to deal with a verse or two, yeah, you can come up with a prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
Like right here.
Right. Now, spiritually speaking, right, he does deliver his people. And that was my other response to this question, that he doesn't always. I actually went to Hebrews 11 too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. To me, that's classic because you see both ends of the spectrum right there.
You get both. And
it's a very well-known chapter, at least the first half of it. You know, we often forget the second half. But spiritually speaking, he will deliver us not from physical stress or distress, but he will deliver his people in the end and make us whole. You know, the true shalom, which we all have to look forward to, which is why we can have hope in the midst of a circumstance that we don't know if it's ever going to resolve the way we would like it to. And that doesn't need to be the last word, because Christ gets the last word because of what he accomplished for us on the cross. And so you've got those kind of two different levels happening here, where on a physical level, God did deliver. We'll go to the wilderness as an example. He delivered some of them out of the wilderness, but not all of them. You know, the generation that sinned, despite their crying out to God after their sin, he didn't deliver. They went into the wilderness and did not come out. But he does deliver that next generation physically. But for all of them, he delivers spiritually. And that's where, you know, I think we can read those verses on a spiritual plane and say, despite my circumstances and the despair, God will deliver.
And there are so many verses elsewhere in the Bible that say the same thing that you're saying with the Hebrews text. The ones that I was scanning for this new series, thinking about all of the places where faith and believing is found in the Old and New Testament, and I thought, wow, Peter in his epistle makes it so clear that faith has to be tested. So even that part is what we need is we need faith to remain, faith to endure. And that's what God promises to give his own. So there's a lot of comfort even in the fact that when you cry out to the Lord, he's going to deliver you from your distress, even if the circumstances don't change, because what he's going to do is he's going to mature your faith in such a way that your relationship with him is more important, and it stabilizes everything. It does not take away grief. It doesn't take away pain necessarily, but what it does is it grants you this assurance that you belong to God. He is your God, and he's doing in you exactly what he said he would, preparing you for eternity with him. So the scriptures are filled with that sense of fulfillment that is non-physical, non-emotional at times. Which is tough, because that means we have to put up with some pretty bad things in a badly broken world at times. And both Psalms, both theological considerations start off with the exact same verse. Exactly.
Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. So there's, a common thread too for these two Psalms that works for this podcast great, but in our life all the more.
Well, you did a great job too. The opening, and my mom mentioned this, the opening minutes on Sunday was so helpful because you helped us see that there is some continuity as we move from book 4 to 5. It's clear, and the story is going to continue. Mm-hmm. God's people are going to continue to rejoice. And so I forget 107:1. I was at the end of that, but 107 verse 1. Yeah, so you have that praise, the gratitude section, mm-hmm. and no doubt that the story is continuing with God's faithfulness. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
We're taking a break
from Psalms.
Do you want to give a sneak peek for our 5 listeners out there?
Okay.
What's coming on Sunday?
So you and I did settle on making mature disciples. Mm-hmm. And then each week of the 8-week series will develop that in some way, shape, or form. Yep. You said the 3 of us, you and I, but Jordan, I guess, is winning the day on potentially what the images might look like for the dominant image for the series. And this is coming from the work that the elders did maybe 2.5 years ago, something like that, where we worked on a sort of a complex, robust definition of what a mature disciple is. Mm-hmm. And I'll ask you about that after we're recording a little bit, how we'll incorporate that sentence. So we're working off from this description of a mature disciple, trying to hit, what were they? Were there 4 or 5 elements to that?
5.
5. Mm-hmm. So there's 5 elements. One of the 5, the third element is knowledge. Mm-hmm. And it's at that point where we're going to pull in 3 or 4 weeks on some of the doctrines that are under fire right now in the evangelical world. We want to get that before us as well. But the most of the series is sort of aiming at, this is what we feel a mature disciple is. Let's make sure that that's in front of us, that we're working towards that together. Is that kind of a fair?
Yeah, which I think is great. It's always good to keep in front of us and that was, I think, one of my favorite things about that time together as elders is saying, what are we all about? Like, what's the goal of our church? Yeah. It's not just to meet on Sundays and to put good events or even good sermons together, but what are the aim of those things? Yeah. And it's to make mature disciples, followers of Jesus that are growing deeper in their faith. And so then we say, okay, well, what's a disciple? So you ready? I got the sentence, I think, in my head. A mature disciple of Jesus is someone who is growing maybe deeply growing deeper in their faith, love for, and knowledge of God, actively serving and growing in Christ-like character. Yeah. So there you go. Good. Those are the 5. That's good. Faith, love, knowledge, actively serving and growing in Christ-like character. Yeah, that's good. So, that was just a way for us to think about, what does a follower of Jesus look like? What are some components? And it's certainly not exhaustive, and someone else can come up with a different definition, but that was just a way for us to put some meat on the bones there, and that's what we had to do.
You were helping us too, because that sheet that I remember was titled Metrics That Matter. Yeah. And we even talked a little bit about, how do you even measure? And that's what we were trying to do with a spiritual checkup tool a while back. Right. Now here are some metrics that we can try to measure. How do we know if we're doing it?
Yeah, one of my friends from another church mentioned that idea to me, metrics that matter. Not the same things that we have, but the idea of, how do we know if we're meeting the goal at the church? And I mean, you can measure attendance and you can measure offerings, and those tell part of the story, but not the most important part of the story.
Nothing internal as far as the heart. How are we doing in our walk with the Lord together?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are the 5 things that we're really aiming for, these 5 elements of and facets of being a disciple. And they're hard to measure, but we want to talk about them and encourage us to grow in them.
Yeah, if you were one of the fortunate ones that attended the annual meeting, the annual congregational meeting back early in the year, I don't know if it was the end of January or early February, whenever it was, we talked about these types of series. We run through books of the Bible as much as we can, but throughout the year, we want to continue to try to put some strategic series together that address, important areas that will help our church keep moving forward. And I'm looking forward to doing that. I think that's helpful. We'll certainly do some more toward the end of the year too. But for now, this summer, this 8-week series will be part of that.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Yep. It'll be good.
Good.
Carry us through the rest of the summer.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys listening. Love you. And we hope to see you on Sunday.